My name is Kalen Rin, 31 years old. Once a sworn blade of the kingdom of Valamor, now nothing more than a ghost, wandering the forbidden wilds of Luminara Forest. 6 months ago, they stripped me of my rank, my sword, and my name. They called me deserter, traitor, all because I refused a single order. The order was simple: burn Crossmere to the ground, every house, every barn, every living thing inside. The village had sheltered wounded orcs, enemy soldiers, yes, but also women and children who had nowhere else to run. I stood there in the torchlight with my blade in hand and told General Alaric Vagorn, the man who had trained me, that I would not do it. He looked at me like I had already died. They dragged me away in chains, no trial, just exile into the forest everyone said no one ever left. I walked until my boots wore through, until my stomach forgot what food tasted like, until the only voice left in my head was hunger. Hunger has its own logic. At first it whispers, then it bargains, then it screams. By the third day without food, reason starts to crack. You look at roots you would have stepped over yesterday and wonder if they might be edible. You stare at mushrooms the color of rot and think, maybe this one won't kill me. That was when I found the moon petals. They grew in a small clearing where moonlight somehow reached the forest floor even at midday. The flowers were beautiful in a way that felt wrong, petals thin and silver white, glowing faintly like captured starlight. Every child along the border knew the stories. Moon petals were poison, beautiful, sweet, and deadly. Eat one, and your blood turned to fire. Eat enough, and you never woke up. I knew the stories. I still knelt down, hands shaking, and plucked a handful. The first petal touched my tongue and tasted like forgiveness. Sweet, cool, almost kind. The second and third followed before I could stop myself. For one heartbeat, I felt nothing but relief. Finally, something in my stomach. Then the fire began. It started in my throat and raced down my chest like liquid lightning. My vision folded in on itself. The trees tilted sideways. I tried to stand, but my legs had already given up. I hit the ground hard, face pressed into damp moss and rotting leaves. The last clear thought I had was simple and stupid. At least I won't be hungry anymore. Darkness swallowed me whole. I don't know how long I lay there. Time had stopped meaning anything. What finally pulled me back toward the light was the sound of footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, crushing leaves and snapping twigs without care for silence. Someone was coming. A voice cut through the haze, low and rough, edged with irritation. Dead like this. What a waste of a perfectly good idiot. Strong hands grabbed the back of my cloak and hauled me upright. I was too far gone to fight or even open my eyes properly. The world became a blur of motion. Being dragged, my boots scraping across the forest floor, branches whipping past my face. Every jolt sent fresh fire through my veins. I tried to speak, but only managed a weak groan. Whoever was pulling me muttered something in a language I didn't understand, then switched to common, voice thick with frustration. Hold on, fool. If you die now, I'll kill you myself. The last thing I felt before everything went black again was the strange warmth of a body much larger than mine pressing against my back, as if trying to shield me from the cold that had already settled deep in my bones. Then nothing. I woke to heat. Not the burning poison heat from the flowers. This was different. Steady, living, pressed against my spine like a furnace wrapped in muscle and soft leather. My head throbbed. My mouth tasted like ash and regret. I opened my eyes slowly, afraid of what I might see. I was inside a small wooden shelter, rough walls, a low ceiling made of woven branches, a stone fire pit glowing faintly in the corner. No furniture, no windows, just earth floor and the faint smell of smoke and something metallic, sweet. And an arm. A thick green-skinned arm was draped heavily across my chest, holding me close. The hand at the end of it was large, calloused, scarred across the knuckles. I could feel slow, deep breathing against the back of my neck, warm puffs of air that stirred my hair. My heart slammed against my ribs. I turned my head just enough to look over my shoulder. A female orc was curled behind me, asleep. Her face was inches from mine, long black hair spilled across her cheek and shoulder. Her skin was the deep green of summer leaves after rain, marked with old battle scars that ran like silver rivers across her collarbone and down one powerful arm. Small tusks curved from her lower jaw. Even relaxed in sleep, her features were sharp, regal, dangerous. I knew that face. Every soldier in Valamor had seen sketches of it. Medria Bloodpeak, queen of the Bloodpeak clan, the orc who had taken her father's throne by challenging his killer to single combat and winning. The same orc whose name our generals spat like a curse. And right now, she was holding me like I was something worth keeping warm. I stayed perfectly still. Moving seemed like the fastest way to die. My mind raced through every possible scenario, each one ending with her waking up and snapping my neck for being a human in her arms. Outside, birds began to sing. Morning light filtered through gaps in the wooden walls. Medria stirred. Her arm tightened for a fraction of a second, then went rigid as awareness hit her. She pulled away so fast I almost fell forward. In one fluid motion she was on her feet, eyes wide, then narrowing into sharp slits. The queen of the Bloodpeak clan stared down at me like I was a problem she hadn't planned on solving. We looked at each other in the dim light of the shelter, two enemies who had somehow ended up sharing body heat through the night. Her voice came out low and rough like gravel under a boot. "You're still alive." I swallowed, my throat raw. "Apparently. You ate moon petals." I was hungry. Moon petals are not food. I figured that out. Silence stretched between us, thick and dangerous. She crossed her arms, studying me like a hunter deciding whether the wounded animal was worth the arrow. I spoke first, because the quiet was worse than any answer she might give. "Why am I still breathing?" She turned toward the low doorway, looking out at the forest as if the trees might give her an answer. When she spoke again, her tone was flat, almost annoyed. "Don't flatter yourself, human. I needed shelter. You happened to be in the way." But her eyes flicked back to me for a moment too long, and in that glance, I saw something that didn't match her words. Something almost like recognition, something almost like regret. I sat up slowly, my body aching like I'd been beaten with a hammer. The shelter was crude, probably an old hunter's hut, long abandoned. My pack was in the corner, my sword missing but otherwise untouched. The fire had burned low, just embers now. "You dragged me here," I said. "Why not leave me to die?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she knelt by the fire pit, stirring the coals with the stick until flames flickered back to life. Her movements were precise, efficient, like someone who had done this 1,000 times alone. "I could have," she finally said. "It would have been easier." "Then why didn't you?" Her shoulders tensed. She poked at the fire harder than necessary. "My brother nearly died from moon petals when he was 8. A dare from his friends. I found him collapsed in the woods, foaming at the mouth. I carried him to the healer and watched him for 3 days while the fever broke." She paused, her voice dropping lower. "When I saw you lying there with that same stupid, peaceful look on your face, like death was just a nap, I couldn't walk away. It wasn't logical. Still isn't." I stared at her. The queen of the Bloodpeak clan, scourge of Valamor's borders, had saved me because of a memory. Not strategy. Not mercy for an enemy. Just a ghost from her past. "I'm sorry about your brother," I said quietly. "Don't be," she snapped, but there was no real bite in it. "He lived, grew strong, died 2 years ago in a skirmish with your kind." The words hung there, heavy as smoke. I didn't know what to say. Apologies felt hollow. Instead, I asked the question burning in my mind. "You know who I am?" She glanced at me, her eyes sharp as flint. "No. Should I?" "Kaelin Rin, exiled from Valamor for refusing to burn Crossmere." Her expression shifted, subtle, but there. Recognition. Crossmere, the village that sheltered my wounded warriors. "Yes." "You refused the order." "I did." She stood brushing dirt from her leather pants. "And they exiled you for that?" "They did." Another silence, this one different, less hostile. She paced the small space, her boots thudding softly on the earth floor. "Fools," she muttered. "Both sides." I couldn't help but agree. "We're not so different, are we?" She stopped, turning to face me fully. For the first time, a ghost of a smile tugged at her lips, not warm, but real. Careful, human. Say that too loud and someone might believe you. I managed a weak laugh. It hurt my chest. Your secret's safe. She nodded once, then grabbed a water skin from the corner and tossed it to me. Drink. The poison's mostly out, but you'll feel like death for a day or two. I drank greedily, the water cool and clean. When I lowered it, she was already at the doorway, pulling aside the hide flap to let in more light. You should go, she said. This forest is unkind to humans. I have nowhere to go, I admitted. Exile means no home, no allies, just this. She looked back at me, her expression unreadable. Then find somewhere, or don't. Your choice. With that, she stepped out into the morning mist and vanished into the trees, leaving me alone in the shelter with the dying fire and the lingering warmth of her presence on my skin. I sat there for a long time, staring at the spot where she had been. The Queen of the Orcs had saved my life, not out of pity, not out of calculation, just because she couldn't walk away. And somehow, that made the world feel a little less broken. But only a little. 3 days later, she came back. I was skinning a rabbit by the stream when I heard the footsteps. Deliberate, unhurried, the same heavy tread that had dragged me through the forest. I didn't look up at first. Part of me thought I was imagining it. The other part knew better. No one else walked like that in these woods. When I finally raised my head, Medria was standing 10 paces away, arms crossed, watching me work. The morning light cut through the trees and caught on the silver rings in her tusks. She wore the same simple leather gear, but today there was a fresh scratch across her forearm, still beating with blood. You're still here, she said. Not a question. More like an accusation. Nowhere else to be, I replied, wiping the knife on my sleeve. Figured the forest would finish what the moon petals started. She didn't smile. She never seemed to. Instead, she walked closer and dropped a small bundle at my feet, dried meat, a few flatbreads, and a water skin that smelled faintly of herbs. Eat, she ordered. You look like death warmed over. I stared at the food, then at her. Why? Because if you die out here after I dragged you 2 miles, it makes me look incompetent. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I tore into the meat like a starving man, which I was. She sat on a fallen log across from me, elbows on her knees, watching the stream rush past. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It felt earned. When I finished, I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. You didn't have to come back. I know. Then why did you? She picked up a small stone and skipped it across the water. 4 jumps. Impressive. I told myself it was to check if you were still breathing. Make sure the poison hadn't finished the job. And the real reason? Her jaw tightened. Because the last person I watched die from moon petals was my little brother, and for 3 nights straight I sat there wondering if I could have done something different. I didn't want to carry that again. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. She didn't seem to expect me to. She visited again 2 days later, then 3 days after that. Each time she stayed longer. At first it was just food and a few clipped words. Then it became conversations that stretched into the evening. We talked about war. Not the glory, but the exhaustion of it. The way it hollowed you out until you forgot what peace even felt like. She told me how she had taken the throne by killing the orc who murdered her father, and how half her own clan still whispered that she was too soft for the crown. I want peace, she admitted one night, staring into the fire I'd built. But every time I speak it aloud, someone calls me weak. They say an orc queen who doesn't crave blood isn't a queen at all. I fed another branch into the flames. My people called me traitor for the same reason. Refusing to burn a village full of innocents made me the villain. She looked at me then. Really looked. Her amber eyes reflecting the firelight. We're both traitors to our own kind. The words hung between us like smoke. By the 5th visit, something had shifted. She no longer left at dusk. She stayed until the stars came out, sitting across from me with her back against a tree, knees drawn up. I told her about the night I refused General Vagorn's order, about the look on his face when I dropped my sword. She told me about the weight of the crown, how every decision cost lives no matter which way she turned. One night, the air was colder than usual. I added the last of my wood to the fire. She watched the flames for a long time before speaking. I have a proposal for you, Kaelin Rin. I raised an eyebrow. Should I be afraid? Probably. She met my gaze without flinching. Come back with me. To the Blood Peak clan. I froze, the stick in my hand halfway to the fire. You're joking. I don't joke about my clan. Her voice was steel. I need hunters who know how to move quietly, who can teach my warriors better ways to survive instead of just charging in. And I need proof. Proof of what? That humans and orcs don't have to kill each other on sight, that someone from the other side can stand among us without a blade at their throat. She leaned forward, firelight dancing across her scarred face. You're already exiled. You have no home to return to, and you chose not to burn my people when you could have. That means something. My heart was pounding. Your clan will tear me apart the moment they see me. I will protect you, she said simply. My word is law. Anyone who touches you answers to me. I stared at her. The queen of the Blood Peak clan was offering me a place in her world, not as a prisoner, not as a trophy, as something dangerously close to an ally. This is insane, I said. Yes, she agreed. The worst idea I've had in years. I looked around at the forest that had become my prison. The empty days, the endless hunger, the silence that pressed down until I couldn't breathe. Then I looked at her. When do we leave? I asked. She stood, brushing dirt from her leathers. Dawn, pack light, and try not to die before we get there. As she disappeared into the trees, I sat by the dying fire, heart racing with something I hadn't felt in months. Fear and hope. The worst idea in years. And I was going to say yes. The journey north through the Forbidden Forest took 4 days. Medrea moved like she owned every shadow, every root, every breath of wind. I followed half a step behind, my pack light, my sword long gone, carrying only the clothes on my back and the small knife she had given me on the second morning. We spoke little at first. The silence between us felt like a held breath. At night we slept beside the same fire, close enough for warmth, but never touching. Each morning she woke before dawn, checked the perimeter, and handed me dried meat without a word. I ate it anyway. On the 4th day, the trees thinned. The land opened into a wide valley cradled between jagged mountains. I stopped at the tree line, stunned. This was no war camp. Stone longhouses with thick thatched roofs stood in neat rows. Smoke rose from dozens of chimneys. Children, small green bodies darting between legs, chased each other with wooden swords. Women mended armor by the river, men hauled timber. The air smelled of wood smoke, roasted meat, and wet earth. It looked alive. Medrea glanced back at me. Close your mouth, human. You look like you've never seen a village before. I haven't seen one like this, I muttered. She led me straight to the largest building in the center, the Great Hall. Warriors stopped what they were doing to stare. Whispers rippled outward like wind through grass. A child pointed. A mother pulled her daughter behind her skirts. I kept my eyes forward and my hands empty. Inside the hall, the air was thick with smoke and tension. 10 orc chieftains sat around a massive oak table, their faces carved from stone and old grudges. At the head sat an empty seat, Medrea's throne. She took it without ceremony. Every eye turned to me. A massive orc with a scarred face and a broken tusk rose first. His name was Krugen. I learned it quickly because he spat it at me like a curse. You bring a human into our hall? His voice boomed. Have you lost your mind, my queen? Medrea's voice was ice. He saved lives by refusing to burn Crossmere. Lives that belong to our clan. He is still human, another chieftain growled. Blood does not lie. He has no home, Medrea said. No king, no banner. He is free, and I have use for him. The hall erupted. Voices crashed over each other. Accusations, demands, threats. Krugen slammed his fist on the table so hard the wood cracked. You would let a Valamor dog walk among us, teach our young, sleep under our roofs? Medrea stood slowly. The room quieted, but the anger remained simmering. I am queen, she said, each word a blade. My word is law. He stays, he hunts, he teaches. Anyone who touches him answers to me. Silence. Then Krugen laughed, low and ugly. Then I challenge your word. Vongtron, dawn. Winner decides the fate of this human. Medrea didn't blink. Accepted. The hall exploded again. I stood there, heart hammering, realizing I had just become the prize in a fight for a throne. That night, Medrea found me outside the hall, leaning against a wooden post and staring at the stars. She carried 2 tankards of something that smelled like fermented honey. "You're an idiot for agreeing to this," I said. "I know." She handed me a tankard, but backing down now would be worse. I took a long drink. It burned going down. "If you lose..." "I won't lose." She looked at me, firelight from a nearby torch dancing in her eyes. "But if I do, run. Don't look back." I met her gaze. "I'm not running." She studied me for a long moment, then turned away. "We'll see." Dawn came too quickly. The entire clan gathered in a wide circle of packed earth behind the great hall. Torches burned around the perimeter. Warriors stood shoulder to shoulder, their faces grim. Krugen waited in the center, bare-chested, muscles rippling under old scars, fists wrapped in leather. Medrea stepped into the circle wearing only leather breeches and a simple chest wrap. No armor, no weapons, just muscle, speed, and centuries of orc pride. The rules were simple: no killing. First to yield or fall unconscious wins, but everyone knew the truth. Some fights didn't end cleanly. They began without ceremony. Krugen charged like a battering ram. Medrea slipped aside at the last second, driving her elbow into his ribs. He grunted but didn't slow. He swung again, a haymaker that would have shattered bone. She ducked under it, swept his leg, and slammed her knee into his stomach as he fell. The crowd roared. They fought like storm and mountain, brutal, unrelenting. Krugen relied on raw power. Medrea used his strength against him, turning every charge into an opening. Blood trickled from her lip. A bruise bloomed across Krugen's cheek. Then he caught her, his massive arms locked around her waist, lifting her off the ground. She twisted, but he squeezed harder. I heard her ribs creak. The clan cheered. I stepped forward without thinking. A hand grabbed my shoulder, hard. "Don't!" an old orc warrior growled beside me. "This is her fight!" Medrea's face twisted in pain. Then she slammed her forehead into Krugen's nose. Cartilage crunched. He roared and loosened his grip just enough. She dropped, spun, and drove her fist into the exact same spot on his ribs she had hit earlier. Once. Twice. 3 times. Krugen staggered. Medrea didn't stop. She leaped, wrapping her legs around his neck and twisting. They crashed to the ground. She locked her arm around his throat, squeezing with everything she had. "Yield!" she hissed. Krugen's face turned purple. His hand slapped the dirt once, twice. A 3rd time, Medrea released him and stood. The circle fell silent. She looked at every face, breathing hard, blood on her knuckles. "I am still your queen," she said, voice carrying across the valley. "And he stays." No one cheered, but no one challenged her either. As the crowd began to disperse, Krugen pushed himself up on one knee, wiping blood from his mouth. His eyes found mine across the circle. They burned with hatred. But he said nothing. Medrea walked toward me, limping slightly. She stopped close enough that I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. "You still want to stay?" she asked quietly. I looked at the blood on her hands, at the warriors watching us with suspicion, at the future that had just become 1,000 times more dangerous. I met her gaze. "Yes," I said. She gave the smallest nod. "Then welcome to hell, Kaelin Rin." And for the first time since I had been exiled, I smiled. The first real attack came at the height of summer, when the valley was thick with wildflowers and false hope. Word arrived at dawn. A Valamor raiding party had burned 3 border hamlets during the night. Retaliation followed by sunrise, orc warriors striking back, killing soldiers, taking supplies. Then another raid, then another. The old cycle spun faster than anyone could stop it. Medrea stood in the great hall surrounded by maps and shouting chieftains. She wanted defense. Fortify the passes. Protect the villages. Refuse the pointless raids that only fed the fire. Krugen and the hardliners wanted blood. Immediate. Total. I stood at the edge of the room, silent, watching her face tighten with every raised voice. When the arguments grew loud enough to shake the rafters, she slammed her fist on the table. "Enough. We do not chase ghosts into the dark. We hold the line." The hall went quiet, but the anger remained, simmering like coals under ash. That night she found me outside, sharpening arrowheads by firelight. She sat across from me without a word. The silence stretched until she finally spoke. "Vagorn is coming." I looked up. "How many?" 200, maybe more, with siege engines." She rubbed her face, suddenly looking every one of her 34 years. "He says the king wants the orc threat removed once and for all." I set the whetstone down. "Let me speak to him." "You think he'll listen?" "I was his student once. Maybe some part of him still remembers the man who taught me honor matters more than orders." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. The next morning, I walked out under a white flag. Vagorn met me on the open field between our lines, armor gleaming, face carved from stone. The man who had once called me son now looked at me like I was already dead. "Cailan," he said, "I'd still playing traitor?" "Still playing soldier," I shot back. "You taught me better than this." He laughed without humor. "The king has spoken. The orcs must be driven back or destroyed. There is no middle ground. There is always middle ground," I said. "Let the civilians go. Stop this before more children die on both sides." His eyes hardened. "Children died at Crossmere because you refused my order. Don't lecture me about mercy now." He gave us 1 hour to evacuate the non-combatants. When I returned, Medria was already organizing the retreat. Women, children, elders, everyone who couldn't fight, was to head north into the high passes. The warriors would stay and slow the Valamor advance as long as possible. I stepped forward. "I'm staying." Her head snapped toward me. "No. I'm not asking." She grabbed my arm, grip bruising. "This is not your war anymore. It became my war the moment I chose you." For a heartbeat, her eyes softened, raw, unguarded. Then the mask of the queen slammed back into place. She released me and turned away. "Stay if you must. But if you die, I will kill you myself." The battle began at noon. Valamor came in perfect formation, shield wall, archers, cavalry on the flanks. Our warriors met them with raw fury, axes singing, war cries shaking the valley. I fought beside Medria, my small knife replaced by a borrowed orc blade. Every swing felt like atonement. We held for 3 hours, long enough for the last families to disappear into the northern passes. Then the line began to buckle. I saw the archer too late. A Valamor soldier on the ridge drew his bow, arrow aimed straight at Medria's heart as she rallied a faltering flank. I didn't think. I simply moved. The arrow took me in the shoulder instead of her chest. Pain exploded white-hot through my body. I staggered, dropping to one knee. "Cailan!" Her voice was the last thing I heard clearly. Then the world tilted. I felt her arms catch me as I fell, pulling me behind a broken wagon. She pressed her hand hard against the wound, blood seeping between her fingers. "Stay with me," she ordered, voice cracking for the first time since I had known her. "Do not dare! Leave me now!" I tried to speak, but only managed a groan. Her face swam above me, fierce, terrified, beautiful. For one brief moment the queen was gone, and only the woman remained, holding me like I was the only thing left in her world. "The healer found us there." Old Nell worked fast, cursing under her breath as she packed the wound with herbs and bound it tight. I drifted in and out, aware only of Medria's hand never leaving mine. When I woke again, it was night. The battle had ended in a fragile stalemate. Vagorn's forces had withdrawn just enough to regroup. Medria sat beside my pallet in the makeshift infirmary, armor still streaked with blood. Mine and others. She looked exhausted. But when our eyes met, something in her face eased. "You idiot," she whispered. "I know." She leaned down and pressed her forehead to mine. "If you ever do that again, I will finish what the arrow started." I smiled weakly. "Worth it." 3 days later, under a white flag, Medria and Vagorn met on neutral ground. No grand treaty, no cheering crowds. Just 2 tired commanders signing a simple agreement. Cease hostilities along the border for 1 year. Review terms after. It was paper thin, held together by nothing but mutual exhaustion and the memory of too many dead children. As they signed, I stood behind Medria, shoulder bandaged, arm in a sling. Vagorn met my eyes once. There was no forgiveness there, but there was something close to understanding. When it was done, Medria and I walked to the edge of the valley at sunset. The forest stretched below us, dark and endless. I pulled the dried moon petal from my pocket, the one I had carried since the night she saved me. I held it out to her. She took it gently, turning the fragile bloom between her fingers. "From death," I said, "something new can begin." She looked at me, eyes bright with everything we had survived. "Then let's begin." We stood there, as the sun dipped below the mountains, two outcasts from two worlds, choosing each other anyway. The peace we had won was fragile. Tomorrow it might shatter, but tonight, under the same sky, we held it together, and for now, that was enough.